Okay, again, welcome to this webinar on multi-skill, well, arithmetics, calculations, whatever you want to call it. A difficult subject. So my name is Koole, by the way. Again, happy to see so many of you in this webinar. Yes, multi-skill calculations, that's really a difficult subject. So, and I'm going to try to make things, to not make it any more complicated and to give you, well, some ideas or some ways to do, well, to make these things perhaps a bit simpler. This is a difficult subject. In case you cannot follow some of it, and I'll try to do my best, but we have a recording which we'll put on our website. And so afterwards, if something was not completely clear, then, well, you can always look it back and then hopefully it will become clearer. But I guess it's good to know that this webinar and all the other webinars are available on our website. So what is the goal of the webinar? Well, as I said, I will give you some insights in why multi-skill operations and why it is complex, some rules of thumb on how multi-skill behaves and how to make these calculations. But actually, before we really start, I'm interested in asking you a question, you as the audience. So what I did in here in Google Meet. And I'm going to open the polls again. So I prepared a poll. So I'm very much interested if you as, well, an audience, and I guess most of you are working in call centers, if you are using multi-skilled operations, and I hope you can see the poll. I see people voting. So have multiple skills, but people always work on one skill at a time. So a few hours on one skill, on certain skill, and then on another skill, or with skill-based routing, or that you say, hey, we're not doing that, but we might be, or also possible that you don't do it at all. Okay, I see some votes coming in. Let me share. I think you can still vote, but I see 20 votes by now. Majority of you, and perhaps the audience is biased because it's multi-skill. Perhaps more people using a skill-based routing are in the audience, but the majority of you is using a skill-based routing. So interesting. Second question. Which is perhaps a logical follow-up question, is the following. How do you make calculations? Yes? Do you do it yourself, or do you have a planning tool doing it for you? But perhaps for long-term planning, for capacity planning, perhaps you're using Erlang formulas, which are not fully suited, as we'll see. Perhaps you use tooling, perhaps you have simulation tooling, or perhaps you look, okay, based on what I did in the past, I know that if I have a certain mix, that works out well, and then, well, you scale it up or down depending on your forecast, these type of things. Okay, let me show you the results. How I still can enter, but that gives you a feeling of what other people do, and I think that's interesting by it. Now, so what a number of different answers. The answer that's most chosen is based on my experience in the past. I scale up or down by a certain percentage depending on the forecast. That's this working with ratios that many people do. Then, of course, there's your planning tool, and well, of course, I don't know what in all the planning tools out there, but I've seen some tools that use Erlang calculations in the insight. Not saying that that's the right way to do it, but I know that that some do. Okay, okay, very interesting. Uh, thank you very much for sharing this. Okay, so I'll end the poll and let's get really started. Um, so, of course, many of you use multi-skills, so we can be quick on that. But what are multi-skill situations? Well, of course, you can, well, train. Here you see multiple skills, but then all these calls that are in these queues go to one group of agents. Here, so here, here you see the queues, and here you see the group of agents. That's how I did this. Our calls arriving, enter a queue. Then they go to a single group. That means that you have different skills, but everybody is trained on all skills. Of course, this is super expensive, and in general, it's not even possible. Yes, if you have a call center with 10 languages, if these are your skills, nobody can speak 10 languages. Of course, you can have it all apart. Well, that's, well, perhaps handling times are short, but it's definitely not flexible, and you lack certain advantages of scale. So that is neither the right solution. Yes, and we'll go into more details, but to set your stage, what do I call multi-skilled operation? And this is the type of situation that we're considering today. So you have here simple situation, 2 skills. You have some agents which are single skilled, which can only handle the upper skill. You have some agents that can only handle the top skill, and you have some agents that are who are cross-trained who can handle skills. And in one of the polls, I asked you, do you use skill-based routing, or do people always work on one skill at a time? Most of you said, no, we really use skill-based routing so that 1 minute the agent can get here who has multiple skills, who's cross-trained, can have a call from top skill, and later on he or she can have a call from the bottom skill. Yeah? And that's what we're had type of situation is what we're mostly going to focus on. Of course, this is, well, harder to plan, and we'll see why. But in principle, yeah, it's a trade-off between the 2 top situations. Yes? So you don't to train, like in this situation, everybody on every skill. On the other hand, you don't have the disadvantages of having, let's say, separate call centers within one bigger center. So this is, in principle, a trade-off between the advantages of both situations here. On the other hand, you have more decisions to make. It's harder to manage, and well, it's harder to plan this in an optimal way. Now, why is this the case? Well, if you have a single skill situation, or well, one call center, everybody cross-trained on everything, which is basically also a single skill situation. Then, if you do staffing, if you compute the number of agents that you need, then it's just one number for every 50 minutes, the number of agents that you need. However, if you have n skills, then potentially you have lots of different skill groups. Yes, combination of skills that agents might possibly have, and then I'm not even talking about preferred skills and different levels in the skills. So that adds another layer of complexity. And so potentially you can have any combination of skills. Yes, and that is, if you have 3 skills, then it's 8. If you have 4 skills, it's 16. Well, minus 1 because the possibility that somebody has no skills at all, of course, that doesn't occur. For example, you have 3 skills. Let's say regular sales calls are premium, perhaps business-to-business sales call, or premium customers, and let's call it P. And you have another type of skill, let's say admin A. Yes. Then what are the possible skill group? Well, the single skilled agent, R, P, and A. Then agents having 2 skills, the combination of all the 2, and then of course agents having all 3 skills. So you can see as the number of skills increases, the number of groups increases actually exponentially, and that's the number of decisions. You have to make decisions about how many agents to schedule in all these different groups. Of course, not all these groups occur. Usually you only have a subset of these groups. For example, here it might be the case that agents start with R and then acquire P. So P without R won't occur. So these are then the sets that are possible in this situation. So it looks worse than it is, but still, you will have different skill groups. So it means you have multiple decisions. One of the consequences of this is that there's no simple way to predict the performance. In a single skill situation, we often use Erlang formulas. Yes, and that starts with Erlang C, and you can make this more complicated by adding things like patience and readouts. If you're interested, go look at one of our earlier webinars. But in principle, there are formulas available for the single skill case. So easily you can say, okay, if this is my forecast, this is my average handling time. I have many agents, this is my service level, for example. In these multi-scale situations, that's not the case. And actually, the only thing we can do is either, well, come up with some approximation that is not always that good, or actually something that we call simulation. And what is a simulation? A simulation is well, it's mimicking, replaying the call center in your computer. So in your call center, customers are generated, handling times are generated, and all the calculations are done. Just as it should look as much as possible as the actual call center. And actually that takes time to do this simulation. Erlang, on the other hand, is really a formula. Yes, it's a formula that you can, it's not a super simple formula, but it's still a formula. So if you write a piece of computer code that executes this formula, that's way faster than this simulation. And so this combination of having many possibilities instead of the one number, you have to decide about all possible skill groups, perhaps 10 or 20 numbers. And then you cannot, for all different combinations, you cannot easily calculate what the outcome is. That is what makes things complicated. Yes, and actually, if you have some methods to find out, okay, what's the smartest combination of agents, and then you need algorithms that are indeed very complicated and that take a relatively long time to compute. Okay, so that is, let's say, the bad news. But what can we do about it? Is this the end? Should we all buy complicated simulation tooling and use that? Well, the objective of today is to dive a bit into, is there some middle ground? Can we make things a bit simpler where we can still get a reasonable estimate for this indeed difficult problem? So let's look at that. Well, 2 things to realize is and the best you can get as soon as the people are trained. Again, getting there is costly and impossible. But when it comes to performance, the best situations, the more people are more multi-skilled, the more flexible they are, the less customers are waiting. So you can never do then fully multi-skilled. On the other hand, a full lack of flexibility, and of course multi-skilled, you can see it as skill-based routing as a form of flexibility, that you have agents that have the flexibility to take calls from different queues. If you don't have this flexibility, if everybody is single-skilled, and then you get, let's say, the worst possible performance. Yes? Um, and that gives you the boundary in which you are. Well, as I said before, the problem is that multi-skilled agents are more expensive. Perhaps pay them a higher salary, but you also need more time to train them, depending on what type of skill it is. But in general, they cost more. And of course, you don't want to have people working on skills for where they get, let's say, 1 call a day. That's not efficient, and probably they're unhappy because well, you need to keep the skill up to date by having now and then regularly call. Yeah. So, well, this is all about this trade-off between, let's say, the cheaper single-skilled agent and the more efficient in terms of being more flexible, adding more to the bottom line of the multi-skilled agents. Yes, and if you put that in a drawing, you get this. Yes, so these, you increase the level of multi-skilledness, and later on we are going to say a bit more about that. But if you increase the level of multi-skilledness, there's more efficiency in the operation, and you need less agents or less agent hours, as you can see here. However, the more and more multi-skilled agents you have, the more you pay on average for your agents. Yes, if everybody is single-skilled, then this is the price, including training and everything. If everybody is multi-skilled, this is the price, and if half is multi-skilled, well, the price is, that's a straight line, that's linear. Now, if I multiply these two, if I multiply the number of agents that I need times their price, then I get a figure that looks like this. So you see that you don't want to have a fully single-skilled call center, yes, because you simply need too many agents. You don't want a fully multi-skilled call centers because the agents are too expensive. And there are some, well, a sweet spot here somewhere, well, I'm not saying in the middle, but somewhere between these two. Also note that this is relatively, around this minimum, this lowest level here, it is relatively flat. So it doesn't matter whether you're here or there or just a bit to the left, a bit to the right, but you want to make sure that you're here. That's an important insight, that this is, well, as we say, somewhat robust to changes in this multi-skill. So the question is, well, where should we be in this level? Yes. Now, as you might know, I'm a scientist. That's my background, and starting from indeed being a queuing theorist, I became interested in call centers, and that's how actually also how CCmath started over 25 years ago. So for me, it's logical to go and see and look at the scientific literature. As I said, I'm a scientist, but of course I'm not the only one. And other people have been looking into this kind of problem as well. As from a theoretical perspective, of course, we have to make the translation to practice, and I'll try to do it as good as possible. But let's have a look at this. And well, here is what you see here is the front page of an article that was actually never published. And it's an interesting combination of a PhD student who was working in a call center and some people from academia. But one of the, well, if you dive, it's interesting, of course, to dive into it. But, well, the important thing is already in the abstract. 20% of the staff budget should be spent on flexible servers, while 80% should be dedicated to be spent on dedicated servers. And what they found here is they did all kinds of experiments. Yes? And they tried all kinds of different situations, bigger, smaller call centers. They made some approximation for the performance, and they saw, hey, this is going well if you have 20% multi-skilled. Yeah? So that is interesting. And the good thing, of course, you should all verify this. Don't do this blindly. Always look at your situation. What are you doing now? Does this suggest more or less multi-skilledness? You and don't do this blindly. But that's an interesting observation. We're going to have a look at it closer. The good news is it's not like it should be 20 and not 19 or 21. If 20 is around here, then 19 or 21 or 15 or 25 will give similar results. Yes. But it's a starting point to have a look. And I think it's an interesting observation. And of course, perhaps over time, there will be new insights in the scientific literature or from practice, people saying, hey, this is not at all the case. Actually, it would be interesting to know of you, what is your level of multi-skilledness? How many multi-skilled agents do you have? Okay, let's have a look at an example what this would mean. Yes. So here I have an example. I just did something. I try to keep things as simple as possible for today. But what you see here is a call center, 2 queues. Here you can see the forecast. I translated everything in minutes. So the forecast is 5 per minute on this first scale. Average handling time is 3 minutes. So the workload in Erlang, as we sometimes use it, as common in telecommunications. And when you're using the Erlang formulas, the way I prefer to present it, so you have work, let's say, for 5 times 3 is 15 agents full time. Yeah, if they are available. And of course, shrinkage should be added on top of all this. I'm not going to talk about shrinkage. I'm going to focus on the multi-skill calculation. Here I also have patients. So 8 customers who spend a lot of time in the queue, they leave on average after 5 minutes. Unless they get served, of course. And if you, there's a second queue, parameters forecast is 4, average handling time is 5. And now if you do an Erlang calculation or a simulation, you will find that you need 18 and 23 agents to reach the 80% serve. If you have less agents, then you're below 80%. Of course, you can do that in the Erlang formula. I will show you where you can do that on our website again in a second. But let's first go to the fully multi-skilled situation. Yeah, so here it's still simple. These are people that have both these skills. I left out the parameters here, completely the same. And now you have, again, a performance of more than 80%. For that, you have 39 agents. Yes, with 38, you're just below 80. So I took 39 here, but as you can see here you have total 41 agents. So 5% less agents, 5% less staffing, and service people are even a bit higher. Okay, so around 40 agents. 20% should be multi-skilled. Yeah, so let's use this rule of this paper by Relay and Chomsky and Tarbordon, and let's have a look at it. So this is the performance, and I'll show you in a second how you can do that yourself. Yes, but this is the performance if you follow this rule. So what did I do? I said, okay, 20%, that's around 8. So I have 8 multi-skilled agents. I took here, so proportionally, both 5, but almost proportionally, I decreased these numbers here. And what do I get? Well, of course, is this curve on the previous slide, it is decreasing. And we still have, if you add them up, to sure, yeah, 39 agents. So we're still saving 2 agents. And we're having way less multi-skilled agents and still 80% performance. Of course, a bit less than there, but because again, the curve on these figures I showed is still decreasing, doesn't increase fast. If you increase the multi-skilledness any further, there's so-called decreased returns of adding more and more multi-skilled agents, but you see that is still 80%. So how did I do this this calculation? Well, I actually used for myself, I'm opening the wrong window. Let's take the right window. For myself, I used an R interface, but you can, for this, you can use this tool here. And let me share it with you. Is it? Yes, it's here. On our website, we have under resources, we have Erlang calculators. Then you see here Erlang C, Erlang X, blending, chat, but also a calculator with multiple skills. And here you can enter exactly numbers that you saw here, 5, 4, what is it? Sorry, 3, 5, and the patients here, 5, 5. The acceptable waiting time, that is the 20 in the 80-20, so I took here 20 seconds, and then the number of agents, the number of single-skilled agent type 1, single-skilled 2, 8 here. This is about routing. Let's not focus on that. Yes, I'll to say a bit more about routing in a second. And then you say calculate, and then you get this 80 and 82% service level that you see here. So actually, it takes a fraction of seconds for the answer to come back. There's, of course, a little bit delay in such a web page, in loading a web page, but there's also a bit delay in the calculation. So I'm not focusing. So if you want to do all the calculations here, go to our website and check it to get a feeling for it yourself in case you really want to dive into everything that. Yeah. So okay, let's go back to the. So I hope it's clear how we did this. Of course, the goal of this rule, of course, we can check if this rule is okay, as we just did by using this simulation. But to apply the rule, oh, it's just applying this 20% rule. So I think it's an interesting insight here. Now let's look at something else. And because this simulation is, in a way, an ideal situation. But as we know, forecasts are always wrong. Yes, and we call that the forecasting error, but that's not necessarily an error of the forecaster. That doesn't mean that he or she did something wrong. Simply, it comes by the fact that there's variability that you cannot always predict, and sometimes, well, there is some natural variability that's unavoidable, but sometimes there is real variability. Then you really some component of the volume was wrongly estimated. Yeah, what happens then? Yes. Now let's do it. Let's suppose that you make a 10% error in both lines. Yes, of course, if you make a 10% error in the same sense, which will often occur, that you underestimated your volume by 10% for both lines, then of course your service level will decrease, and real-time management will do something like hopefully finding some agent somewhere who can shift perhaps the channel or have whatever possibilities there are to save the service level. But suppose that something else happens. Suppose that on one line there's less volume, and on another line there's more volume, like it's here. Yeah? In a single skill situation, in the first situation, we see that, well, one service level goes up, the other one goes down, and there's no connection between the two. So, well, that's what's happened. So it's up to time management. Well, switch agents from one skill to another. Hey, but they were single skill. So, well, I don't know what the solution would be here. In the case you have the multi-skilled situation that we just described with this 20% multi-skilledness, this is what you see. Yes? So you see actually that these 8 agents, of course, depending on the necessity, they more of type 1 or more of type 2, depending on the volume, depending on the customers that are in the queue. So you see that it's not 80-80 as it was before, but it's, well, it looks way better than the situation here. Okay, but it's still not quite good. So how could we make the service level even more balanced here? Well, actually, that there are two solutions to that. And well, perhaps we have this, and I skipped over it while showing you the simulation. Perhaps we could do something in the routing here. Yes, perhaps we could change something in the logic, in the way that calls are assigned to agents and vice versa, that make the situation better. So we will have a look at routing. And another way to solve this, of course, is, well, this requires a certain flexibility, that these forecasts were really wrong. Yes, so this requires some flexibility. So perhaps we should increase the level of flexibility to fix this. So let's look at routing first, and then we'll look at the also the number of multi-skilled agents. If we should perhaps increase the 20%. Okay, so let's talk about routing and related to that intraday management. And actually, one thing that perhaps at first sight looks surprising, but if you think of it, yes, of course, if you really do routing in I'm seeing some interesting questions in the chat. We can talk about that later. Also, after we can have a look at dive into that in the Q&A in the end. But interesting question that I see coming. So routing can make, actually, if you do it really wrong, of course, I hope you don't do it, and you probably won't, but can make the situation worse than single skill. Yes? Okay. Now, even if your routing is okay, that still means that it is, well, what we often call static. And static means that there are certain routing rules in place that, well, they do not change over time, but they do not adapt to the current situation. And if your routing rules do not adapt to the current situation, then, well, you have to have a separate form of real-time management in place to repair these situations. But real-time managers, of course, most of the time they will take away certain skills of the multi-skilled agents to make sure that they really work on the skill where it's needed. That can make things actually worse. So let's have a look at that. So first, a better routing. Yes, if you give these multi-skilled agents, we saw before that what was the situation? It was 80 something and 75, if I remember well. Now, if you give priority these agents here, typically what the routing rule for these agents is that they take the longest waiting call. Yes, but now we know that we need additional capacity for this queue. So only by setting a priority for these agents to handle these calls, that already improves the situation here to almost 80-80. And there are ways, and I'll show that afterwards, because that's related to the answer of the question that is in the chat. You can even have some form of reserving capacity here for these time to calls. So this already makes the situation better. What would you do on the real-time management? Well, you won't change the routing, because instead of that, what you would do is you say, okay, I need some of these multi-skilled agents, I need them to be dedicated to this second skill. Okay, so we remove one skill from them, so now there are only 6 multi-skilled agents, and there are 20 type 2 agents. Yeah, so 2 agents were we're moved from this skill group to that. Okay. Now, hopefully you don't forget to set it back at the end of the day. But the thing is, now it becomes more. Now you don't have this 20% multi-skilledness anymore, and it behaves more and more like a single skill call center. Yes, and therefore you lose the flexibility, and well, the differences are relatively small. But as you can see, the performance is worse than under a good routing strategy that adapts itself to the situation. And on top of that, so there's work done by real-time managers, and the result is, well, that is worse than with good routing. So that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so what is the solution? What could be an even better solution? Well, if you know two things, well, actually assume with the second bullet. So we know that we have a certain amount of forecasting errors. So if we, from the analysis of our historical data and the forecast we made, if we know that we regularly have forecasting errors of 10%, which of course is not extremely high, why not add an additional 10% to the flexibility? And as we saw, it's relatively flat when it comes to total cost. Why not add increase this 20% to, let's say, 30%? We also saw, because of this increasing curve, that surface level of skill-based routing is always lower than fully multi-skilled. So, well, why not add one or two agents? Perhaps that's easy to say, but it was decreasing. So let's, oh, I wanted to show you this here. So let's look at this figure. So what I did here is instead of eight multi-skilled agents, I moved it to 12, and I went total of 40, and then you really have a great situation, which is better than the other one. Even with 39, of course, and here 12 multi-skilled agents, you get to 80-80. So this adding one agent is not really necessary. It's really about this 10%. Okay, so that is the main message of what I want to say today. This upper and lower bound, fully single skilled, fully multi-skilled. You want to hit the right trade-off, and have from the literature, you have this rule of 20%, and knowing that doesn't account for forecasting errors. So I think it is good to increase this a bit to account for that as well. So that is my suggestion, my rule of thumb. If you want to have like a simple way to deal with this issue, realize there are a couple of disclaimers I have to make. Realize that I didn't talk at all about shrinkage. Of course, that should be added to all the calculations here. And realize also that when you do long-term calculations, that your capacity itself, if you say, okay, on the basis of this, if it says 12, 12, 16, okay, approximately, well, what is it? 30% of my agents should have single skill, 30% of my agents have skill 1 and 2, and 40% of my skills have only skill 2, of my agents have only skill 2. Yes, then you get to this 12, 12, 16. However, if you're scheduling, definitely in the longer term, it might be that the availability of agents due to the shrinkage might be different from the different skill groups. Yeah, so if you're using this type of calculation for capacity planning, then do take some additional flexibility. So increase these percentages even higher for to account for fluctuations in capacity. Okay, to keep things simple, I only talked about 2 skills today. And talking about 3 or more skills makes things really more complicated. But a few things that I want to say about this. The first thing is make sure that all the skills are connected. Yes, so if you have a number of skills, make sure that there, well, are multi-skilled agents that make the connections that you do not still get 2 separate call centers. I sometimes see that. Yes, and of course there are good reasons for that. Sales is really a different activity than support or administration. Yeah, but if it's possible to make that connection, it really pays off. So make sure that all the skills are connected. And it is better to have agents with few skills than few with many. So you have different types of systems where you have ABC and you have people doing A and B and C and perhaps A and C. Then you make kind of a circle. Or you can have ABC, only a group of people having A, B, and C. Then it's better to have this first situation. Many agents with a few skills than vice versa. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the presentation. As I said in the beginning, multi-skilledness, skill-based routing is really a difficult subject, hard to do calculations. Simulations is a bit cumbersome. Instead of the scheduling tools, of course, it is used. And if you have quite advanced and elaborate tooling, you can use it. But if you want to make simpler calculations, I hope that I've given you some pointers on how to do that. If you're interested in our tooling or talk further about skill-based learning or other subjects, contact us. You can you can go to our website and click on the contact button or ask for a demo. We have Jesper here in the call, and I saw Bas and Wout as well. If you have certain challenges and you just want to talk about it, and feel free to book a slot with Bas. With me. Really, what drives us is our interesting problems, interesting workforce management problems, and solving them. So, if you have anything to share, we're always happy to listen. Our next webinar is next month, May 28th. And in due time, we'll announce the subject of that. So we'll hope you'll join again. And thanks for your attention. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. That's perhaps the easiest. And I already saw one. I quickly looked at it minutes ago, but let's take a look at it. I'm interested in the background of the multi-skilling calculations. So again, the tool that I just showed is a simulation. So in the background, there is really a call center where calls are. So in the background, there's a simulation running where calls are generated, they enter a queue, and there are agents, and then we sample handling times, etc. And then the queue evolves, and then you you gather the statistics over a long period of time to get reliable numbers, and then and that's what you report. So that is what you do. And as I said, the Erlang formulas are really formulas. I would like to understand how to club 2 skills where one is useful and the other very small. How to hit service level on both of them. Okay, is it much? Yeah, if handling times are very long, that is, then there's of course overlap between intervals, but that doesn't necessarily play a role. Of course, if handling times are very long and you have only, let me show you in the simulation, because this is for this type of question, these simulations are really perfect to get some insight. So let's go back to the simulation, and I will share it. And of course, if to everybody, if you need to leave, don't hesitate. But if you want to stay, well, I'll give you a bit more. I'd be happy to if you stay while we're experimenting with this simulation tool. So suppose that I have, well, let's make it the same to keep things simple. So I have here two queues, and I hope it's clear enough. Well, perhaps I should make this a bit bigger. So what you see here, I have a volume of 10 calls per minute on one type and one on the other type. Yes, and now what is typically the case in such a situation? Well, of course, if I have, so my volume is 11, so perhaps if I have 60 agents, if they're all multi-skilled, then things go well. Yes, okay, and you have 86% service level within, so perhaps with one agent less, you could still reach 80%. Yeah. Now, this type 2 calls, probably not everybody is multi-skilled. Yes. Now, so perhaps out of these, what was it, 60 people, well, perhaps you say, okay, I have here a volume for 5 agents. Well, perhaps this is the situation. That's actually what I regularly encounter. Hey, you don't, for example, when it comes to multi-language call centers, perhaps type 1 is English and type 2 is, let's say, Dutch, and the language we speak in the Netherlands. So, and the big call center might have, well, this type of rates. Now, if I do nothing, yes, just standard routing, then of course, service level on type 2 will be way worse than my service level on type 1. So indeed, one of the things you can do here, well, one thing you can do is that even though agents here, so you first assign calls to the single skilled agents, and you give priority to type 2. So that's also the suggestion that somebody gives here in the chat. Now, if I calculate, it's already much better. Yes, it is 87 or 71. But perhaps that's good. That's not good enough. Now, real-time management will do the following thing. It would say, okay, we set some people dedicated on type 2. Now, what's happening? Well, let's see. Well, we're not reaching service levels, so it should be even higher. Now we had, let's say, 5.5. We started with 60. So let's keep the number of agents constant. Okay, well, that does the job. Yes, so now we see that the service levels are good. The occupancy here is not that high. We could actually even do a better job than this, than using real-time management. We could say, and then I always have to think which one to put in. We could say, okay, I'm only assigning multi-skilled agents to type 1 if there's one agent available who could do a type 2. So that is not moving skill, it's like keeping a bit of capacity, trying always to keep capacity for type 2 agents. Yeah, and then the service level gets even higher. And so that is an algorithmic, a routing way to do almost the same as you do with real-time management, but the routing does it. If your ACD allows it, the routing does it. and it gives a better performance. And if this is not 1 but 0.1, then you really need this, because if this is really low, yes, and then of course we don't need 60, but if you but 55 agents. Now if you have agents here like this, if you do it this way, then you will see that the occupancy of these agents will get really low. Yeah, because real-time management says I dedicate agents to type 2, but the performance gets really, and the occupancy gets really low. So then it's better, well, I shouldn't, I should have removed the 1 here, but then it's really better, so this would be worse than it is. Well, it's still 23. So then, yeah, then you really need this type of rule where you say, okay, always reserve 1 agent for type 2, and then you will see that the occupancy is well, still low, because you try to keep capacity available for type 2, but it's way better. Okay, a long answer to the question in the chat, but I hope it's clear. And if you have additional questions, you want to dive deeper in it, well, try this calculator, but we're happy to chat a bit longer if you want. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in. So again, if you want to have a chat with us at some other moment, don't hesitate to contact us. We're always happy to hear about interesting call center challenges. But for now, thanks again for attending. As I said, the recording will be online in a couple of days, so you can have a look at it. And of course, the calculators are there, so please have a try. And hope to see you next time in next month for our next webinar. Thanks again for attending.